Tonight, I am primarily going to use questions that people wrote before the meeting tonight. That I encouraged everyone to ask exotic and everyday questions and cosmic and personal questions, and no matter what I ask, the questions come out. I have noted that from one view, all of this is very, very strange. And I have also attempted to note for you that from another view, at other times, this appears to be absolutely non-strange. But, let me note for you again, there is one great continuing strangeness, which is this, that if this is the sort of thing that you want to know about, then presently I know more about it than anybody. The strangeness is, why can't I tell you directly what it is? I am not bad-mouthing myself when I say me. That's just one example, because no one at any time zone, at any place, can do it. But assuming that I'm telling you in a valid manner with words that if this is what you want to know about, I know more about it than anybody presently. If so, why are not all questions just directly answered? But for those of you who have been around a while, I would then ask you a question. Well, how come your questions have changed so drastically? When you came here, if I had openly solicited your questions, and some of you people getting this on tape, other times and other places, you write me these questions having to do in the beginning with faith healing, astrology, and how sick you are, and all the questions that some guru down at a drugstore gave you a new diet, and you want to send me 3 pages of it and ask me to comment on each and every little time that you're supposed to eat shredded carrots and bean sprouts. But then after you've been here a while, and then of course some of you ask about, was Jesus actually the Son of God? Was Moses really a holy man, or was he just a salesman on the road? Was he in women's wear? The questions start off like that, and after you've been here a while, notice I have to, on nights like this, I have to actively put up notes and solicit people to ask specific questions. And they get down to, as I'm going to read some of them, at times very, very mundane. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But you people should note yourself that you start off with almost these bulletproof questions. Where is God? You know, if you know where he is, why don't you tell me about it? And plus, tell me how I can talk to him or her or it. And what do I think of the I Ching? What do I think of so-and-so mystical system? And have I actually ever read such and such book by so-and-so? And if I haven't, they'll be glad to send me a copy to help further my education. But good old time questions. Let's see what happens. Well, I guess I wouldn't put them in order. We will just start reading a bit. Why is it, or what is behind the assistance that writing seems to provide in clarifying word voices and maps? Even if the words are not again read, simply writing them down seems to aid oftentimes to me in thinking and listening. You know, what's up? All right, all of you should have noticed this. Well, all of you do not actually participate that much in writing. I have encouraged all of you, when you feel the slightest urge, to write. Write commentaries, write a short story, if it's just suddenly an observation that seems to really click. Something that seems to be new energy flowing through you, is to write it down at the least provocation. Also at the least provocation, feel free to let me see it. I enjoy seeing these. There are those of you, and this would always be true no matter what size of group of people, no matter where they were, there'd be a group of people already wired up that their first inclination is to write, to take notes when I talk. There's some of you that would be about as far removed from your hardwired motivations, that is to write, as it would be to followed those two guys off the Empire State Building using a pocket handkerchief as a parachute. Of course, some of you that are wired up that way, you should look at that as being a kind of task to periodically undertake. But the majority of you would fall somewhere within the bell curve of those two extremes. That is, that you oftentimes write down things. Sometimes they're no more than a note to me before the meeting or a question. And oftentimes, many of you note, hey, I started this question that I just asked part of, and it suddenly struck me that I do understand some of it. That's one version. Or a question, I've been thinking about so-and-so, and could such and such be true? P.S., since I've written this, something else just sort of came to mind, and I believe that I understand why some questions should not be asked. Many variations of that, but most of you should have already had the experience that it seems as though, notwithstanding my apparent attack on words at times, ordinary word-mongering, I'm even pointing out that the word maps really do not take you where you want to go, but beyond all of that, there are times that most of you should have already experienced that you wrote down something, whether it was ever seen or not, and just the writing of it down seemed in some way, I'll just use ordinary words, seemed to clarify it, seemed to stabilize it, seemed to be pleasing when you wrote it down. You would think, well, I knew what I was about to write. It was only 2 sentences long. But once I wrote it down, it was me writing it. Nobody was telling me. I wrote it down. It came out of my own little wiring system, out of my own little brain. I wrote it down, but then when I got through and looked at it, I went, wow. There's several ways that you can look at what is going on. And the kind of descriptions I could give, I could make them or classify them as being both mundane and otherwise. It would be according to the kind of condition that you were in when this energy seemed to come forth, when it seemed to be something out of the ordinary, that seemed to be a specific benefit to write it down. One way you could look at it is writing down something when it seems to help clarify it. Let's just leave it at that right now. For some length of time, even just momentarily, you were glad you wrote it down, you looked at it and went, yeah, hey. One way that you could neuralize this is as a kind of material distraction, a concrete distraction from that unspoken question of what am I going to say next? Because once you've done this, chopping up reality into this one little time frame, the unspoken question that I have spoken for humanity, whether they ever hear it in my lifetime or not, it's not the point. You people heard it, of what are you going to say next? Once you've heard that, that unspoken question is always lingering around, or it should be. And so being able to write something down is almost a kind of concrete, temporary proof that, hey, I don't have to put up with this crap. There it is. There's what I'm going to say next. There it is. I said it next, and there it is. I can look at it. I can turn my head, and I can look back, and yep, I said that. I said it to myself. I wrote it down. There it is. Still there, yep. I still agree with it. Yeah, I said that. It doesn't seem to quite have the passion it did 60 seconds ago, but I said that. And it was important at the time, and I like it. I'll put it away in my drawer, and I'll pull it out a year from now. Another way to look at it, I'm not making fun of it because of the little humor I throw in. But another way you could look at it is as a kind of spurious proof that you do have specific yellow circuit intentions, as opposed to most of the day people just wandering around, and if you're still trying to on your own do a continuing observation of what's going on up here in line with some of the tasks I originally gave out, is this is a kind of apparent truth that right now I do have specific yellow circuit intentions. My mind is not like a howling wolf song. It is not out rambling around in the woods of Mississippi. My mind is no longer rambling. Right here, it's pinned down. It said something, perhaps even cogent. At least it's literate. I said it, I wrote it down. Now, a little closer to the basis of the question from somebody involved with this about what's going on, why does it seem this way? That's a little further than the kinds of examples I just made up, or the two ways I said you could look at it. It can serve a very specific purpose. I will point out that with everyone that I have ever seen, and I have seen things that went on thousands of years ago, since they're all within your nervous system, or they're within mine, everyone should go through some sort of stage of wanting to put down what they're saying and writing. A slight variation right quick I will throw in. Another variation would be people who would need, in their case, to express it verbally to someone else. But that, you should understand, is simply a variation of writing it down. Almost everyone goes through some stage of that. If you remember, those of you that I was dealing with personally here, I told you in the beginning, and you people just starting out with your involvement with this, it is a kind of continuing rule. I don't beat people over the head, but you should not attempt to go out and talk to people about this. But plus, you're not supposed to make it seem to be a secret society. You cannot go out and talk to anybody about it to begin with. There is no profit in it, and those that survive the original urge to do so, you finally come to your own temporary understanding that, yeah, I'm glad I didn't, or, you know, I cheated. I hope he didn't find out, but I remember sometimes I cheated and I tried to talk to people, and I look back on that now from a vantage point of perhaps only a few months. I look back on it now, and it almost makes me embarrassed. I can almost remember some of the things I was trying to talk about. That was pitiful. There's even more danger than that. But you should not attempt to do it. But everyone goes through the stage of wanting to. Then, almost everyone, as I said, goes through a stage that it seems, which is the only thing important to you, it seems to serve a useful purpose. Whether you end up trying to write a book about this, some novel that would set the world on its ear, or whether you just start keeping some sort of diary is what happens, or whether you start trying to sketch out cartoons or paint, that in some way you try to take what you begin to understand that is out of the ordinary, and you try in some way to fix it. What I was really getting to is I also have found out in history, those that survive a bit further past that, it gets to the point that you almost write nothing, you almost have nothing to say, and people that get that far, I normally have to turn around and really start pushing them, and then I'm put them in charge of, look, we need some writing done, and you're in charge. But it's then the people who are past the point that they don't have any natural need anymore, that they will write something down or go buttonhole people or go out on street corners and talk about it. There are stages of this that I've never described, and based on some of the questions tonight, maybe I'll mention it again, but there are little series of stages. The description, or if you could fly back in nervous system time, apparently it would have been different 5,000 years ago in China, 4,000 years ago in the Middle East. But once you understand it, these sorts of stages have a certain kind of continual parallel sameness to them. But any of you that feel the least urge, I want you to understand this again. You should write, whatever the method. I mean, you're not writing to please me, you're not writing to try and copy the way I talk. It should be that feeling, that kind of spark that you want to write it down, even if you've never written. Even if it's just a feeling like, that's the greatest thing that I have ever thought, and it's so far removed from me, if I don't write it down, I may never have a thought like that again, but at least I get this one treasure, is do it. You should. But do not look for any more. Don't expect any more. Then to get it down, just leave a comma after it. That if I am pleased that I wrote this, I like it, I should write more. I should always write down these great thoughts. Comma, okay, but don't look for any more right then. But you should by all means do it. Here's one. I won't read all the questions, but it's on this basis, that someone was out in ordinary life, confronted with a situation wherein they couldn't tell whether they should tell, quote, the truth, or whether they should slightly color it to make things go in a smoother manner. And then they mentioned the kind of conflict they seemed to have with the partnership over doing this. And they thought they observed that their own already hardwired sense of morality seemed to come into it, even though they tried to theoretically dismiss it, and etc. This is a continuing question that pops up, and so on that basis it is deserving of a continual response of some sort. It is this feeling that, and again, after you're into this for a while, it changes to the point that you don't really have to ask it anymore. But there seems to be, in the beginning, a real problem with some people, especially if I say something like, take the easy way out. For me to, of course, that is not that simple. Don't take that as being pop psychology, because first off, you got to know what the easy way is for you. Not just everybody can do that, but by such methods as I pointed out, that you cannot continue in a warfare with your parents, which to varying degrees, almost everyone feels a kind of continuing or leftover battle. And it's got nothing to do with modern times. It's got nothing to do with the tensions of the atomic age. It's got nothing to do with Freud thinking he discovered it. It is the kind of tension that is a biological reality of the body of life that comes about from the changing of the cells, the changing of the guard, new generations. That everybody to some degree feels some kind of tension with one or more of their parents or whoever raised them, whoever were their stand-in parents. I've just used that example over and over, and I've told you that that is the most useless battle. It is the most predictable, but that is the most useless, and in a sense is one of the easiest to conquer because it is so basic. And that is to treat your parents as though they were God Almighty. Is refused as soon as you hear me mention it, and as soon as it strikes any ring of the truth to you, is never again, never cast any critical eye at your parents and never resist what they say. If you see them once a year, if you call your mother or she calls you once a week, whatever it is never again resist. That is, never argue in any way. Now that is one example of what I mean by taking the easy way out once you understand it. But it is in no way, as ordinary people would probably want to put it, it is in no way a cop-out. If you think it is, you should question whether you are in the right place. It's got nothing to do with any sort of cop-out. It's got nothing to do with morality, and it's got nothing to do with an ordinary sense of lying. Because once you have some understanding that I have, that is you speaking your own understanding, that I have almost no ability to affect what I do. Even my desire, my continuing desire that says I want to change what I do, I've always felt that. I can't take credit for it. That the more I see on my own, not just because he said it, not just because I read it somewhere, but the more I see, I realize that change is almost a word that does not belong in a mortal dictionary. When I realize what little space I have to move around, when I see other people have none, or I see they have no more than I do, at least I'm to that point. Let's give you that much credit. That I can see that almost everyone seems to have so little room to maneuver themselves that questions of change, or why don't you straighten up, why don't you see the light, I begin to see in me that over the years I got more wrinkles, my hair is grayer, I put on weight. I ended up now, I've got my master's degree. I'm making $70,000 a year. 10 years ago, I was still in school. I was living off food stamps. I was chasing women, or whoever you chase. Now I got a mortgage. It seems like I'm a different person. I'm a member of the Young Republicans Party, and etc. And yet, I realize I am almost the same person I was. I'm just older. I'm tireder, I'm more fearful. It's like all the fears, all the dreads, all the resistance I had to life, it too has put on weight, like the fat falling around my hips and thighs. It's like this, that all the weight I had already, all it's done is got a little fatter. I am no different, I'm no better off, I'm no wiser. It's just simply you realize questions have changed. No matter, I've been through EST, I've been through all kinds of groups, I've been through all kinds of religions. I've taken up running, I've taken up fasting, I've taken up health foods, I've taken up a new diet twice a year. And other than my hair being a little grayer and a little more weight, I'm the same person I was when I was 15. I'm the same person I was when I was 12. I just couldn't manifest everything I did in later years. I'm the same person. Once you realize that, the question, like this person puts it, of, I didn't know whether I should tell the truth. Now, I'm not playing with words. We all know what ordinary people mean by, well, tell the truth. And it's better to tell the truth. But once you understand on your own that there is almost no room to maneuver myself, including the dreams that I should be moving in a different direction, these dreams have been with me as long as my dead weight has been with me. This partnership has been going on as long as I can remember being conscious. Once you understand that, once it becomes a continuing part, at line level consciousness at least, there's a continuing part. You cannot shake it for any great length of time. You cannot forget it. Then the idea of the truth takes on a whole new light, not theoretically, not in some religious sense, and especially not because I said so. The matter of the truth, then, is in that same framework, within those same limitations as everything else you've observed about you and life, that what everybody, including me, calls the truth has no room to maneuver, almost none to speak of. That what somebody over here calls the truth to them, that's it. You can torture them. You can pull their tongue out. You can put them on the rack. And they may verbally say, all right, I was wrong. And even that doesn't work. Because the people torturing them say, oh, you're just saying that because we broke all your bones. Nobody believes it. The idea of the truth then becomes a noise. That what this person says is the truth is the noise they make when confronted by a certain kind of situation, or confronted by someone saying, all right, tell me the truth about this matter. That's the noise they make. It's like one of these little stuffed dolls. Some of them you mash them and they squeal like a pig. Some of them you mash and they sound like a dog. Some of them you mash and it sounds like a cat purring. They get mashed. People get mashed by the kind of situation that seems to call forth a demand for tell the truth. Once your personal understanding reaches that point, then you see that what people call the truth is simply a noise they make under those conditions. It has no more meaning to them. It has no more meaning to them than it does the color of their hair. It has no more importance to them than the size of their nose. Then, I'll take it further than the person asked. If you're really involved with this and you understand that, it becomes almost, I just don't want to push it too far, so verbal, I tell you, it almost becomes then a sacred duty for you to treat everybody else gingerly. If someone, let us say your mother, if this sounds too obtuse, your mother, the women you end up living with, and women turn it around the other way, but let us say everybody's mother, that you see her several times a year. Perhaps she is wired up to where she's always whined a little bit, and she's always had a certain kind of down-home vanity. And so every time you see her, she'll be talking about the family and this and that. And she's glad to see you, and she's glad you're home for the holidays. And she tried to cook, but I just couldn't cook everything that you like because, I'm not as young as I used to be. Ha ha! Of course, you can tell that by looking at me, how terrible I look. Let us say that in the midst of this imaginary running battle that you've had with your parents, that normally you just ignore that when she says it. As ordinary psychology would describe such things as like an ongoing game, that she doesn't really expect you to say anything, or at least based upon the past, because you see her 3 times a year, and she always says something like, of course, what can you expect? I have an old bag like me, I'm falling apart. And you always say, is that gravy I smell? Oh, how's Uncle Fred? It's a rhetorical question she asks. It's a comment, and you never say anything. All right, then if I told you, as soon as you walk in from now on to your mother, you say, what have you done to yourself? I've never seen you look so good. And if you were an ordinary person, you would say, well, this surely can't be any part of any kind of spiritual activity because that's a lie. She does look terrible. She's looking worse and worse. And something is inherently wrong for me to go up and tell somebody, especially my own mother, boy, you look good. I couldn't say it. My teeth would crack. She'd look at me and say, what, are you drunk? Beyond the laughter this is eliciting, which you should find curious, this is a fine example. Now, your mother, if the situation I described, because playing with reality, you always run against this dead end. If she's already wired up to do that, then it is not necessarily going to have any benefit of any kind to her for you to start, not just waiting and then responding to her questions about, hey, have you ever seen anybody look this bad at the age of 60? If I say, don't even wait for that to respond, just as soon as you go in from now on, say, boy, you look good. What, have you done your hair? You've lost weight. Well, I don't know what it is. You always were beautiful. I mean, you always were a striking woman, but you look younger. Something's happened to you. You must be, you're living a better life. Something's happening. That may not, as far as you can tell, have any sort of benefit. May not seem to have any great impact on her other than it's interfering with the kind of flows of energy between you two, and the first time you do it, you're going to get a little bit. But that is not the point. You should also learn from that if you do it, and it seems to have no effect other than which it will have anytime you interfere with an established transfer of energy, that is, an apparent game between you and somebody else on an established basis. It will get their attention for a second. Even if it seems to do nothing other than that, let's just leave that as being a kind of minimal response, that everybody will feel a shift of some kind. Then if you don't press it, and everything else being equal as I'm making up this situation, it may have no apparent impact other than what I've just described. You should find that interesting, to say the least. That here it is, I have changed the way in which this thing flows. She's always talking every time I see her about how terrible and run down she looks, and I never respond. I just don't get involved in that kind of crap. It drives me nuts. But here it is, I have taken the initiative in the other direction and told her how good she looks. And I put forth a good act. I know I did, because she didn't say anything, which everybody's voice always tells them beginning, hey, if I try to change the way I act, people are going to say, hey, come on. Of course, those of you that have gone through things I told you, you found out people don't say, hey, come on. No, there's an initial little impact, but people do not notice. That is, they do not notice in the flow of energy enough for them to say, wait a minute, is this candid camera? What are you trying to do to me? My own son trying to bullshit me. Does not happen. That's not the way life is arranged. But, back to what I was pointing out, if it seemed to have no great effect on her, you should find that very curious on the basis, another example of how little room people have to maneuver. That for years she's been saying, God, I look terrible. And you just walk away from it. Maybe you and your other siblings, nobody wants to fool with that. That's not going to get us anywhere. And then you suddenly change the whole complexion between you and her, and she goes, oh, I smell the biscuits burning. And that's it. Now, from any so-called horizontal, reasonable level of expectation, we should have a whole new ball game going on, right? And yet left at no more than what I've described, it will show you what limited amount of room people have to maneuver, to change it all, to change with a situation that seemed to have changed. They seem to be stuck. Now, over a longer range, since I started this example, which was not exactly what the person asked, of course, but with your family, which is, in a sense, so important, but it's so important that you ought to be able to deal with it and you get it over with. It's not a drawn-out process. If you establish that kind of relationship with your parents, that you are nothing but a smiling, happy, glad-hand person, you refuse to engage in gossip with your parents, you refuse to answer personal questions. Of course, it's too late for you people. If I'd got you at an early age, the thing is, anybody involved with this, anybody wired up already when you were 4 or 5 years old, if I had been around and saw you then and could have found you, you should have already operated in such a way that by the age that you were talking good, let's say 5 or 6, you should already, in a very particular way that you don't understand, but you should have already scared the hell out of your parents. If I could have been there, and if I had recognized your potential then, you would have arranged it to where your parents, and then an increasing, expanding number of adults, teachers, rabbis, and ministers, nobody really wanted to fuck with you. Then you wouldn't have the problems that you got now, but as I said, it's too late. But anyway, that's sort of what happens when you do this right. There is no word for this because it is foreign. It is foreign to ordinary relationships. I mean, all of you to some degree, everybody that ever hears this, everybody feels some kind of estrangement, some kind of very real tension between you and your parents. That's just a fact. It's not a psychological reality. It's not psychologically based. As I told you, it is biochemically based. But the kind of relationship that I'm saying that you absolutely need between you and your parents is unnatural. Now, you look around, you and everyone else, the way you're wired up. Not just this situation, but every situation. If you're an ordinary person, you look around and you believe that there are people you know who have a beautiful relationship, sans any tension between them and their parents. And you're wrong. It's like everybody in the world believes, hey, there are people around that are more conscious than I am. If you don't believe that, that is the basis for the market for biographies and autobiographies. That's the only reason they exist, is everybody wants to read a biography, and you read about Churchill or Mountbatten or Brigitte Bardot, Cookie Popo, Alex Carras. Anybody you read about, the way it's written is, these people, they know what they're doing. I mean, their life runs along page after page, sentence by sentence, and such happened, and I went home and I thought about it about 30 minutes, and I decided I'll do so-and-so. Wow, if I could only be like that. At any rate, the situation I was about to describe is unnatural, and it does not happen, not in life. Comparably, just ordinary hardwired people, you look around and you think there are people that have a lot better relationship with their parents. There are people that you look around and you think, hey, there are people who are more conscious than I am, just ordinary people. There are people who know real things that I don't know, just ordinary people. Or maybe famous people, famous ministers and rabbis and gurus. There are people who are happier with life than I am. That's simply part of the scheme of the body of life. What I was about to describe is truly unnatural that you can do now, and that is you absolutely refuse to resist your parents. You refuse to engage even passively in any sort of gossip, and you never, ever have a discouraging word to say in any manner. It'll only take a short period of time, and you will have a totally unnatural situation between you and your parents. And it will put, even though you're 20 or 30 or 40 years late, it will put up a kind of, and I'm not trying to instill any sort of curious mysticism in you or frighten you, but it puts in the relationship a kind of almost fearful respect from your parents to you, that is. For the first time in your life also, you'll feel like you're in control, which is not the point because you've got nothing to control your parents about. It's not to serve any purpose. But once you establish this, and all you got to do is do it and stick to it, starting the next time you see your parents, is have nothing but encouraging words. Nothing. And if your parents start talking about, oh, wait till I tell you what your cousin so-and-so did. And as soon as you hear how it starts, you got to find your own way. There's two simple ways. One is you distract the person. You walk off. You say, do I smell something burning? You say, yeah, I remember her. Hey, also, you remember she used to live up in Dayton? Hey, do you guys ever go back to Dayton? You can do it that way, according to how you are and how your parents are wired up. It'll only take a few times, and they won't really understand it, but they'll stop it. If that doesn't work, once you've already got this thing in motion, is you simply, without anybody else hearing it, and you do it smiling, and you do it as cold as possible. You say, that sort of gossip, our visits are too short. I enjoy it too much. I don't want to hear that. Don't do that. And then say, is that potato pie I smell? And just smile like it never happened. It'll only take once or twice, and they'll stop it. And that kind of respectful fear, that's just a term. But it'll very shortly take place, and your whole relationship with your parents have changed. Now back to the question, are you dealing with the truth in doing that? That now your parents are delighted to see you, now your parents never say a discouraging word in front of you, that you go home for the holidays and family reunions, and if somebody's got to pass gossip, you suddenly notice you'll get a piece up in your ear, and you'll notice your mother will grab your aunt and pull her out of the kitchen to where you don't hear it. They won't do it in front of you. You can see them begin to bite their tongue. Somebody will say something about so-and-so, and you'll hear somebody say something about a car wreck and drinking, and you'll see your mother follow begin to say, oh yeah, I didn't, and you'll see them stop, that they won't do it to you, and you smile. You say, is that potato pie or not? Is that potato pie? Plus, Dad, have you bought a damn rug? Why do you look so much better? How you like the new car? All questions about the truth have changed based upon your understanding, not based upon some theory, not based upon some philosophical idea that I'm in some way above the truth, that I in some way can go around lying to people because I'm involved in a great mystic quest. It's that you understand that the truth is noise people make. The people are wired to it as much as their height. And what they call the truth is meaningless. There is no objective way in which to judge the truth, and that should be obvious to you. Those that worry over this in the beginning, and I don't bring it up to worry you, because I don't mention it much in these introductory lectures that some of you are seeing on tapes, but the question continued to pop up, and so I know it pops up in people that get into this. And it's a great question in the beginning of morality, or am I going to rise above ordinary morality? It's not rise above ordinary morality, it's to understand the absolute hardwired, non-essential for you nature of what is called the truth at the ordinary level. And once you see it, is no longer a question of morality. It's a question of this person in this situation demanding the truth of me. It's a noise they're making. What is to be accomplished by me suddenly realizing in my own partnership I'm wired up to say blah, 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 blah. And I know already that they're going to resist this. I can feel in me that what I'm giving them is resistance. Put quite simply, what I'm going to tell them, they're going to say, no, no, no. They do not want to hear that. What is going on here? Is it that far removed? From a pig complaining because every time it asks a question of a cow, it gets moos instead of grunts? Is there any great difference between a typewriter continuing to demand that a cash register next to it tell the truth, and the cash register goes ding, and the typewriter, that sort of noise, that does not constitute the truth. You're holding something back, you're trying to is it that far removed from it? Now there is built in, I asked you this sort of rhetorical question some time ago, one time as almost a piece of a little task, is I asked you once, why is it that humanity is wired up? Why does life speak through humanity in this way? One way specifically, that it makes man tell himself and each other that the, quote, truth is of grave importance. that's a sign of a real man, a real woman, a real person. You have got to deal in the truth. You've heard that since you were a toddler, no matter your religion, is the truth is of great importance. And nobody questions that. It feels right. Not psychologically, not religiously. It feels right. It feels right in your genes. And I ask you at that time, what purpose could life be using? Since everyone responds to the banner, the cry, the truth is of great importance. And then without being an ordinary cynic, you simply look around, and the truth is not in great demand as currency, according to ordinary people. They even say that history is nothing but the lies that survive. Where are you going to look for the truth? What's the truth? Everybody believes that you're surrounded, or they believe they are surrounded by idiots, liars, con men of all stripes and sorts. So I asked you at one time, what could possibly be going on that life uses the stated feeling, the stated belief that the truth is of great importance, and everyone, somewhere in their little system, responds, yeah. And then they suffer, like none of us can tell the truth. All religions, Christianity, one of the ones that they, I think, have extracted somewhere from the Bible, that the evil spirits, the Satans, the demons, the ones with the horns, the bad forces, are the father of all lies. The very thing going against the truth. The very thing we should all struggle against. Yet nobody can seem to struggle against it. Nobody seems to survive the struggle. Everybody seems to succumb to, ooh, I got to tell a lie. People constantly feel, ooh, what if people really, if suddenly we all had to tell the truth? What would happen to me? I'd be shot tomorrow. I'd be locked up for being a subversive because everyone would suddenly realize, ooh, you hardly ever tell the truth. What is going on? It's the noise that people make. It is the feeling they have. It is not a question of morality. It's not a question of a person rising above it, because I suggest to you most strongly that anybody who understands that in the real sense could not be much more moral. Because once you understand that, I know this is rhetorical to most of you, but it goes along with the kinds of things that people are already wired up to believe in. If you understood more, if your nervous system was beyond its own life-wired processes, I'm suggesting to you, through such questions as this, what would you have to prove? If all these great questions you started off thinking you wanted to know, if you suddenly knew as much as anybody on this planet now, and as you would know enough that you know what people mean when they say, the gods have talked to me, and you realize, well, that's nice, but God, you're about 40 years, how old are you now? About 40? You're about 39 years too late. Not only them, but all of humanity. The time zones always change. But those who say, the God spoke to me personally, as soon as they say that, you know exactly where they are. You know what time zone they are. Anybody would say that. And you also understand by then, you might say it's an inside joke or hobby because you would never do it, but you think, boy, how curious. You say that, you believe it, and yet I understand what you think you mean, but if you call that God talking to you, it's like one time you heard him fart, and you've built this whole system. I could tell you things that is going on with him day by day. He and I are just like that compared to what you know. I'm just making this as all sort of a joke. But that's the sort of feeling. Sort of. So then the question is, they say the truth to them is, I have talked to the guides, and he kind of told me so-and-so. Whatever the guides told him, or his guide or her guide told him, all you got to do is hear what it is, and you know what religion they're brought up in. Jews do not fall down and have a mystical experience and hear the God of Billy Graham talk to them. It does not happen. Conversely, Baptists down in Mississippi do not have a moment of ecstasy and fall down, and suddenly the archangel of Islam come down and give them a revealed message couched in the words of the Muslim religion. No. So at any rate, if they say God talks to them, they know, you hear exactly what their religion is, how they were brought up. Anytime the nervous system seems to have had an experience out of the ordinary, which, as I've mentioned several times in passing, or for you football players, several times en passant. One reason why this does not start out in some way in a religious sense, because once you begin to have any experience outside the limitations of your own nervous system, if I had started this off and inferred in any way that this is religious, trust me, then all of you who were brought up Jewish, you would suddenly believe Jehovah talked to me. The God of my fathers talked to me. Everybody that was Protestant would believe God, or Jesus, I guess nowadays, spoke to me. And you would get nothing from it. It'd be lost. But everyone else is locked into the fact that any experience outside that which is routine to my nervous system, to them is whatever they were brought up. It's like a blank, fill it in. I had a blank mystical experience. And all they got to do is describe it, as I said, and you know what religion they were brought up in. Because that's the only, quote, God they can hear. That's the only, quote, truth they can hear. The easy way out that I started out mentioning has nothing to do with morality, and it certainly has nothing to do with harming anyone. Contraire, again, for you heavy-minded sports people. It has nothing to do. It is not necessary that you try to examine in the beginning on the basis that I'm helping people. That by being so nice to my mother, maybe this will help her see the uselessness of gossip. Do not hold your breath. Perhaps if I can arrange the situation as you described it, my mother will begin, maybe she'll come to me and say, I've noticed over the last few years, you've almost become saintly. I can't describe it, but you never argue. You won't let me badmouth people. And that possibly your mother will fall at your feet and say, lead me to the great truth. That is not the point. But you have not harmed anyone. You have not interfered as a workman for the D-Force in any of the arrangements in life. You have set up situations whenever you do it, no matter how small, and whether you ever see a profit is not the point, but you have set up situations wherein the conditions are more conducive that if there's any possibility that your mother might ever see something, and don't discount it, because how'd you end up here? There was something to your genes and your parents and your grandparents and even your great-grandparents, something specific that some of you might see before you die. Even if they're dead, it may suddenly come to you. But there's a strain that ran through your family that got you here. So I'm not saying, I did not mean that just as a joke, but you cannot expect all good deeds, all good effort, all non-D effort that I make, especially with my kin, my family, in some way will be fruitful. It's not necessarily so, but you have set up conditions that are more conducive. I shouldn't take it any further, but what I mean by that, just for one example, if there's any possibility of your mother ever getting any sensation outside the molecular structure of her 60 or 70-year-old wired used system, at least you set up the conditions that maybe after the 100th time, once you've stopped her more or less from giving you bad news and gossip about people, family and friends, that here it is again, and you've got there in the kitchen at the holidays and you're staying there after about 20 minutes and somebody's name's mentioned and she says, God, you remember that first husband? We like, and it comes to her, the feeling that she shouldn't be doing this with you. Here's just one example. At least you have set the conditions that are conducive. If there's ever the possibility of her having such a curious idea about, you know, what's going on here? This whole thing of me continually wanting to tell him bad news or her bad news, in some way, I don't want to do it anymore. They can't explain why, but they got the message that, you know, something bad might happen, that you might not come back anymore. They can't explain it, they just stop it. They have simply, are now in conditions that are more conducive. If they're ever going to see anything, if they're going to get any passing glimpse, any suspicion, any whiff, there it is. But as long as you're engaged with the same old struggle with them, there is none. Now, that's not only true of your parents, it's true of everyone, but that is a particular situation. Another one, I already had several questions tonight having to do with the good old sexual relations. Social relations, which between men and women. And there's always continuing questions in this. As all of you see that have stuck around for a while, relationships are fairly transitory. People coming and going, relationships breaking up. And then there are always questions that doesn't seem to be the right kind of sexual balance in organizations like this and groupings of people. And you end up, many of you saying, I can't find anybody here in the group or people that are interested in this, and I got to go out and pick me up a woman or a man out in the ordinary world. And then every time I do, such and such seems to happen. It seems to be a continuing struggle. I can't seem to keep up the kind of relationship, etc. Several of the questions tonight, whether I brought them out here or not, were from men having to do with it. And I periodically get them from women, not as often. But the ones from men, I still hadn't left the area of dealing with the, quote, truth out in the ordinary world. Men ask questions about women out in the ordinary world, about getting relationships or trying to get relationships going on. And then sometimes I'm just going to sort of throw together questions I have heard people ask and know that people are interested in over a matter of time with some of the ones that were asked specifically tonight. But then people asking just the same old kinds of questions about the kinds of struggles that seem to go on between men and women, even in the group. And how should you treat each other? All right. Let's start off with people that seem to be interested in this, whether it be here or you people hearing this at some other time in some other place. Perhaps you and your sexual partner started off in this together. Now you found somebody that's showing up for meetings, watching these tapings, there seems to be a mutual attraction of some kind. Then in the beginning, quite properly, if it's somebody that's involved with this, or you both come into it, it seems as though this is really out of the ordinary. For me to be involved with somebody that has a similar interest to me, whether it turned out that my previous partner showed an interest and we both got involved, or whether it's somebody I have become attached to since this has happened. This seems like an extraordinary, or it should be an extraordinary possibility. You're right and you're wrong. You can't pick your parents, and I suggest to you again that you consider the small amount of room you have to maneuver, to think, especially the men. It's almost as bad for women. But to think that you have any room to move around about who I'll pick out. What is my ideal in a woman? And women thinking, what kind of men will I let get me? Who will I let capture me? Women, the women I don't have to talk to this about too, but every time I talk about the men, I get a bunch of people that seem to be around the block and are over the age of 12 that still go, wow, I hadn't thought about that, but it's true. Women got a little bit more room to maneuver, in case you men, I shouldn't say in case, most of you have never noticed it. But still, there is a very small amount of room. Women, this is really parenthetical, but if you'll listen right quick, this is one of these things that seems true, and yet it's not because things are arranged otherwise. But I can sense, in my mystical way, that biochemically, women have even more ability to adapt themselves than is ever manifested because of the situation as it is, which, if you follow what I said, can't ever be proven. But women have got more ability to adapt themselves. It would appear that they got more ability to maneuver around this flow in life for the 60 or 70 years they're here in sort of specific ways. Women, let's say that times seem to be lean. Women can adapt themselves to a man much easier than a particular man can adapt himself to a woman. That was a joke. If nobody heard that, all you got to do all of you non-distaffs, all you got to do is have the ability to look at your whole history right here in your nervous system right now. And if you could, talk about the truth, as you and the partner say, all right, by God, I got a damn monkey wrench and I want the truth. How much ability have you got to adapt yourself to any of the women you've ever been around? And the partnership says, wait. It's not a question of whether I had the ability to do it. I didn't want to do it. I don't have to take that kind of guff off women. Ha ha. I'm still sort of talking about the truth. I'm going to keep bringing it back up. When you get into relationships between men and women, all the way from the apparent excitement when you're still that young, of the first meeting in a bar at a party, and run off in the afternoon and a few drinks, and suddenly you want her to tell you everything about her life, where she went to school, what she's doing now, and you really don't have a steady boyfriend right now. There's nobody I'm going to have to fight. I don't mind. I'll fight him. That kind of excitement. There seems to be this continuing thing of how much truth should be going on here. That, of course, nowadays, as all of you know, here in this time zone, in this part of our planet, we're going through another one of those stages that the truth is very important in relationships. If a man's going to ask a woman, hey, tell me everybody that you ever laid, she should say, all right, we'll get me one of those 3-section notebook folders and we'll sit down and go through it. And the man is going to have to say, wait a minute, that kind of gets me, but I need to confront that, I guess, because then we'll be able to communicate better and it'll be better for our relationship, et cetera, cha-cha. Everybody knows how it goes, that the truth is important. What truth? If somebody asks you, if the person that you're around, that you become attracted to, if they say, hey, have you been sleeping around with men or women, men and women, you take these situations, unless I won't stop and do it specifically, and you just fit it to your own life experience and the way in which you are wired up. And they want to ask you some specific question. Have you ever really felt, the way you and I feel right each other about now? Have you ever really felt that kind of passion, this kind of spark between your body before me? Are you going to tell me but now, based upon any whiff of suspicion of understanding you have, that it would be good for you to really stop and think and say, well, all right, okay, well, all right, there was this girl, her name was Belinda, that I met when I was, you could say, well, that's the truth. I wanted to tell her the truth. We got to switch the tape. I'll be right back. We rolling? That example may seem too obvious, but you should find that curious. How is it I can come up with these examples? They're just too obvious. Then why in the world? How would it benefit you if this woman is saying, or the man saying, have you ever felt this kind of passion? Have you really ever loved anybody as much as you do me? And you go, well, all right. How could that possibly be of any benefit? Even if you came up with nobody, if you had to stop and think and go, you can say, well, that seems too obvious. You should find that curious. You should find that interesting, that it seems too obvious. That no, if I was really still having the hot passions for this woman, and she said that, I don't even like those kind of conversations. I don't like women ask me that, but she said, hey, I expect you've been around. I have too. And we're not virgins, we're not kids anymore, but have you ever felt this kind of, as much as I feel toward you and you seem to feel toward me, and you go, yeah. You say, have you ever felt that toward anybody else? Under what kind of supposed, rational, reasonable, just in any sense of the word, term would you expect it to be in profit for you to go, have I ever felt this kind of passion for anybody else? It is too obvious, but it's not obvious enough, because the answer should certainly be. Not that, wait, I want to be truthful about this. You're asking me a serious question, aren't you, dear? Of course, with a woman, if we're going to use a man and woman example the way I am, by the time you hesitate, you've already lost your bulletproof vest. You have already stepped in it, because women are not as slow neurally as men are. Their nervous system is working at a different speed to start with. Most men are so sharp that if a man tried that and said, tell me, dear, I don't expect that you were non-experienced when we met, but the kind of fun we've had, the kind of passion we've had the last few months, have you ever felt this as much with another man as before me? If a woman, stopped and pulled out a cigarette or wiped her makeup, men are so sharp, it might take a man, 90 seconds, it might take him 2 or 3 minutes to think, you've had time to answer that. How come you didn't answer it? But at any rate, if a woman asked that, and there was that kind, kind of horizontal time, as thick as that paper passed before you gave some kind of passionate response, how could that be a benefit? And do not say, as I started to say, that is too obvious. It is not. Variations of this are going on continually on the basis of people thinking, am I telling the truth? We are talking, in the ordinary sense, when we're talking about the truth, you're talking literally about what people? You're talking about pieces of living cellular machinery within a larger living body. It needs energy. We're subservient to it. The sooner you see it, the better. It's not a negative aspect, and is not having anything to do with the ordinary terms of predestination. Not as you know it. Because once you can see it, you're already in a different position. But once you see that, then the questions about what is being truthful have no validity. Not that you're not moral, not that you're in some way freed and just treat anybody any way you want to. You should be able to sense that already. The sooner you see it, the better. It's not a negative aspect, and is not having anything to do with the ordinary terms of predestination. Not as you know it. Because once you can see it, you're already in a different position. But once you see that, then the questions about what is being truthful have no validity. Not that you're not moral, not that you're in some way freed and just treat anybody any way you want to. You should be able to sense that already. You don't understand, but you ought to be able to sense it. This is not a license to steal. I mean that in the full sense of it. But the matter of what is the truth is then a matter of what is this person wired up to think is the truth. They didn't distill this from their experience. It's now based on their understanding. When somebody says, I want the truth, and here's the question to you, and I want you to tell me the truth. I don't care if you think it'll hurt me, you tell me the truth. All right, there is, again, I suggest to you, the regal collusion's already going on. The poor person doesn't know it. They've already been set upon by Prince C and D. They've already decided for this person what is the truth. They've already decided under what conditions he's going to have to say, hey, tell me the truth. You know when they say, look, I got a question, I want you to tell me the truth. Don't hold back. Tell me the truth, I can take it. I need to know, it's important. Usually by then, if you can get anywhere outside the damn ghost limitations, the outline of your nervous system as it is, you begin to know what people are going to ask. You become a real mystic, but nobody knows it. You don't show off. They say, I got a real question I want to ask you. Hell, you know what it is. You say, okay. And they say, now tell me the truth. And you say, all right. You already know what the question is. And you don't have to stop and think about it. You already know what they want to hear. That is, what they think is the truth. They say, now tell me the truth. I can accept it no matter what you say. That's not true. There's only one thing's the truth to them. You make these sounds, their system is wired up that these sound waves are going in, and they're going to cause the molecules to change around in the brain, and that's going to, like, plug in. It's like a pinball machine is going to light up, and it's going to say the truth. If you make other sounds, and the sound waves go in, they change the molecules around, it's not going to plug in to where their machine says the truth, their nervous system. It'll come out of, hey, you ain't telling me the truth. Come on, level with me. Or else they're going to say, well, you know, hell, I thought I was being serious. I didn't know you were going to joke around. I wanted to know the truth. Your mechanism will be such that then you want to say, after these sounds from that person comes back to you, is for you to say, well, that is the truth. You asked me to tell you, I'm telling you. And they say, oh, you're making a joke out of it. Hell, I'll see you around. So then you can say, well, at least I told them the truth. That's not what happened. Talking about sound waves, we're talking about expectations already wired into nervous systems. We're talking about molecular actions having to do with sound. Where is the truth in that? The closest thing to the truth, once you begin to understand it, is that, you can look at it two ways. I'll start off and make it easy, is that which is not harming another person. Now, there are times and situations in life you cannot go through life harmless. You cannot go through life, as some of the religions have tried to do, to wear a mask all the time so that you don't inhale insects and kill them. There's nothing laughable about that if it was possible. If life was not arranged in a tri-actual manner, that they can't even see that far. And I still tell you that is not necessarily the limitations, but if it was not even arranged any further than that, then all such efforts are not without any merit, but it cannot be done. You can live on vegetarian diets, and you're killing little carrots and spinaches. You're killing things when you continually breathe. Every time you take a shower, you're killing things. Those of you that don't know the kind of baggage you carry around, I mean, if you want to get out, you want to get an electron microscope, you got whole societies living on you continually. At any rate, I was going to the mechanical extreme that has come out in life, that the attitude is not without some merit, except life does not go in a straight line, and that which other people would say that life has made some groups of people, some religious groups say, well, anything that goes against what we have been taught is true, what we believe is true, is evil and should be done away with. As I've tried to get you to see from a multitude of angles, that cannot be. What is called evil, what I have designed for you as a temporary name, the D-force, which constantly changes its name, constantly changes the numbers of the players, that which apparently is C from one view, 2 minutes later is D from another view, or from the same view 5 minutes later is now D and you don't recognize it. It cannot be in a straight line, and so there is no such thing as living, quote, a blameless life. You're going to serve D one way or the other. You're going to serve D by dying. No matter if you tried, if you were brought up in whatever religion, and it was definitely pointed out that here would be our kind of religious person if you did all of these things. Let's assume you could do them. That you are the living epitome of this religion. You do realize, do you not, that let us say that whole group recognized you, no matter how large it was or how small, this whole group said, you are it. You're the one person that we know is living proof of our religion. You're C, manifest in their midst. You do understand, do you not, by now, that everybody who's not a part of that religion, you're D. I don't want to give you the blues, but some people say you can't please everybody. That is just a superficial, though not invalid, observation. If anybody could please everybody, you would be beyond the confines of the three forces. You would be in bad, bad trouble. For one thing, you would be non-existent. And if you were existent, you would be invisible. And if you weren't invisible, nobody could see you. And those who did see you would believe that they had hallucinated. You would be classified in the same book section as UFOs. Relationships between people, the sexual kind. As I said, men normally ask me more about this than women, about even people here in the group. How is it I could get the most benefit out of it? I've given various responses, but here's a quick one. It's for men, because women are more adaptable, and they'll go with this. But if you men that feel like I should really hold on to who I got, or whether I don't know how long it's going to last, but this woman, I just sense I could get something from it. Or this is the only woman that seems to be involved with this that's ever taken up with me. So I guess I ought to treat it seriously. It's either her or I don't know what. And I don't mean that limited to my examples. I'm just picking out sort of a cross view I'm enumerating of what some of you have expressed. Everybody, I assume, has seen them. If not, go buy yourself or rent a black and white TV and watch late at night and look at some of those good 1940 cute couple movies. Does everybody know what those are? They were always upper class, WASP, always Cary Grant and Myrna Loy or whoever they were. They never worked. They were always rich. They're always in tuxedos, always at cocktail parties, always little flirtations. And they meet each other, and then they're kind of pulled apart. It's the same old thing, and then they get back together. A lot of little one-liners, sophisticated music, a little Cole Porter in the background. But they were cutesy. And they never said a harsh word to each other. They just bubbled. The woman would go to powder her face and come back, and the guy would jump up, wearing a tuxedo in the afternoon. He would jump up and kiss her hand, say how much he missed her. Of course, there are other ways, I assume, to go about it, but I'm telling you that is one of the best ways. And the man has to be the one that started, but it's just become, just play out a 1940s cutie couple. If anybody can do that, and you can find any woman who says, boy, this makes me want to throw up, I want you to bring me her name. We'll find a place on the next rocket ship for that woman. She does not belong on this planet. She is an alien. It is simply like a second stage variation of what I said, is you should treat your parents in a sense as though they were Almighty God. Nobody would gossip with God. You can't believe he'd want to. But if he did, you'd surely leave the room. If God starts gossiping, you don't hear it, because if you let him start, the thing is, you let him start about other people, he's eventually going to get around to you. So, plus, it'd run your opinion. To finally meet the big guy. Then you find out that there he is, the guy in charge of it all, and he talks to you a while, and you have a drink, you have a beer, and he looks down, or he thinks about it, and he said, did you ever meet so-and-so? And you said, well, yeah, I used to live next door to him. He goes, say, is that one dumb bastard? Who wants to hear the man in charge of everything start that? Or say, God, that guy pisses me off. He drove me crazy for 20 years. I'm glad he's dead. I hope he doesn't come around here. Now, what I'm saying about between the sexes is a variation. If you got somebody that you're attracted to, but now, all of you should have some whiff of this also, you might as well abandon any kind of notion unless you are specifically beginning to get some kind of little clicks up here that means something to you. But you might as well abandon any kind of notion of trying to give any, quote, psychological analysis to you and the people to whom you're attracted. If you still take that serious, then you're the kind that probably still takes being healthy serious, or other kinds of foolishness. To think there is some kind of psychological basis that I'm always attracted to this sort of man or woman. The basis is right there. The basis is here. It's here. You were born with the basis of it. I told you to reflect back if you know how to do it in your own nervous system. Look at men more so than women, but it's true with everybody. Look back at the kinds of people to whom you've been attracted, whether you lived in the northeast part of the country, whether you lived on the west coast, if you were making $100 a week, or you were suddenly making $5,000 a week, whether you had a white-collar job, whether you were out digging ditches. The different environment would seem to make someone believe that they could maneuver themselves around, and I could begin to expand my social horizons. I could lay a better class broad. Women, I can surely find a better sucker than the kinds I've been out with all these years. I'm in a different position. I'm now in the Big Apple, and I've got better clothes. What do you end up with? All right. Now, I'm not saying it's that way forever, but for everyone else it is. And up until now, for almost all of you, it is that way. And you're wasting time other than, as I said, other than you, if you begin to see something personally. But as far as you, any of you who believe that there is some, across the board, secret reality will be exposed to me if I really analyze what is it in my past that makes me seem to always be attracted to a woman that never seems to be as attracted to me as I am to her. I always seem to be more in love with a woman than she is me. Now, what does that tell me about me and my parents? I'll tell you what it tells you. It tells you that your parents were your parents. It tells you that your parents fucked and you got conceived and here you are. That's what it tells you. Looking anywhere else is an absolute waste of time. Your attraction to the opposite sex is not much different than the size of your honker, the color of your hair. You should simply see that. It's been right there before you all these years. Also, you might look at why life, or ask yourself one of these kind of questions again, what is life up to that came up with, only in fairly recent times, relatively speaking, the great concept of love. Why is it that some of the most revered literature, especially in our time zone, that is the Western world, some of the literature that is considered to be classic, a large portion of it is based upon romantic themes, as it's called. The idea that there is a kind of freedom of men and women to seek out alternates, the kind of post-Dark Ages thrust in Western history that no longer were people just simply pushed about as pawns for economic reasons from one family to another, simply the whole scheme of royalty trying to hold together the power from countries, and it dribbled down into the fiefs and the serfs and the way in which they had to operate, that suddenly there's a kind of freedom in there, or there should be, that we can find our own partners, that a prince can fall in love with a common girl, and vice versa. The literature is that, but then look at your own history. Look at the history of everybody else. It don't happen. You're attracted to the same kind over and over, and yet there is another prime example that people already believe, because life has put that message into its own genes. I'm not going to tell you where it might be going. It's just one of those things that you need to see again. It's going on that there is this kind of belief that there is room to maneuver, that it's not destined that I keep getting attracted to women who are not as attracted to me or not as attracted equally. Now that, without any doubt, that's got something to do, my mother and father, when I think back, their relationship was not actually 50-50. And let's see, my father traveled a lot. My father, in fact, I didn't know it until I was a little older, he was married once before he married my mother. That has got to be meaningful. And I found it out about the time I was reaching puberty. And that had to, in some way, get instilled with my raging horniness. There's got to be some great message here. It's a hobby. It's part of what life keeps people distracted, but What I'm saying is, there is genetically already wired into people, especially in this part of the world. It's beginning to affect other parts. It's been not an absolute across-the-board reality because of life needs in some way. It's just only been a partial thrust in this way, that there is the ability to maneuver and that we're not in some way locked in to our attraction to other people. It is not predestined. It is not always ill-fated love between the Romeos and the Juliets. It is not always a matter that for economic, political, religious purposes I am locked in to pressures of my family. The peer pressure of my culture tells me I have got to marry this type of person, maybe this person specifically. And that doesn't necessarily be the best way to go about it. Do it. The belief is there. I ask you again, if you had the ability to read your own nervous system in the way in which you will be able to eventually, you realize that you have been in fixed marriages all your life. And by that I mean all your relations. You don't have to be married. They were arranged. You think the day is gone. You think that only happened in your grandfather's time, that they had arranged marriages, that is, arranged affairs. Let's include it all. It's not true. Everyone you've ever been in. Even if every time that you have lived with another person, you picked them up in a bar. If you could see it correctly, you walked in that bar and it was as though the genes of your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, the genes of the other person's parents, great-grandparents, had gotten together. You walked in the door in this bar in Sacramento the first time in town, just overnight, and you walked in a bar, just wanted a quick drink before you went down to the hotel dining room, and you looked over there. No analyzation, just your genes made you look right over, see if anybody's with her, and you get right over, and whatever the best line you can come out with, or just, you had no choice. Fortune, fate. The genes of all her parents, grandparents, and yours got together, and this damn affair was arranged. It was. But you need to see that. But then, especially somebody involved with this, you're feeling that it is a singular experience and that they should be treated in a way to release potentials that you imagine are there is true. But the main thing you should do is treat them as though they were God Almighty. You see what little success on the surface that you people have, because this is not by any means the first or 10th time I've relayed this. That doesn't mean that I am saying that none of you try, but look, it is not easy. You are wired up magnetically, biochemically, to be attracted to a certain kind of person. And you can whine about it, you can cry about it, you can try and analyze it in Freudian terms, you can try and analyze it by any horizontal terms, by anything you ever read, and it's not going to make one whit of difference. Because everything that you have been, every arrangement that you have been involved with was preordained. It was fixed. And you need to see it. Part of the proof, again, is lurking right behind kind of common observations people make, but they can't go any further with it, is why is it, women will say it, men will say is it, why is it that I seem to end up with the same kind of damn son of a bitch every time? I'll get rid of one of these damn suckers, and I'll swear I'll never get involved with a man like that. I know his type. He drives me nuts. And women will admit it. I don't know what happened there. I was minding my own business. I got a new hairdo. I redid the apartment. I was glad to be rid of that son of a bitch. I threw away all his dirty underwear and everything he left here, his records, I threw them out. I took up jogging again. I moved. Some of my girlfriends, I found this new bar on 57th Street. I was down there. First night there, this guy walked in. He just I just couldn't believe it. Everybody was looking at me. He walked over and he talked to me. We had a few drinks. We drove around the park. We ended up going over to my place, and I was going in the door, and it suddenly struck me. He looks different. He's got a different name. He moved here from Detroit, and it just suddenly struck me. Now, I've never been with anybody that had, he's in a particular kind of advertising, just something, everything about him seemed to be new and refreshing, and we walked through the door, and I turned the light, and it suddenly struck me, That's the same son of a bitch that I just threw out 2 weeks ago. His mustache is droopier than the guy before him. He seems to have cleaner fingernails. He's a little taller. And it suddenly strikes her, and she's correct. It's the same guy. Same guy. How did it happen when I meant to do so much better? Where is the truth in that? The truth is in the reality of what happened. But those of you that would try to hold something together, is you should never. I'm not playing marriage counselor, but I keep getting these questions. And I do not make these rules. But people continue to ask me, and I'm going to tell you, if you're trying to hold a relationship together, especially some two people involved with this, you should treat each other as though, when I say God Almighty, you people know, but now I don't mean that religiously. But you should treat each other as though the man should treat the woman as though she was the Queen of Sheba, and you should treat him as though he were Mark Antony. You should treat each other as though the sun set upon one another. Of course, men should do this more than women. That's just the way things are, and you know it is. That's the most beneficial way. That's the way things are arranged for women to accept it as their due, which it is their due. Men, it's all right for women to try it. You just have to see, though, how short is the appetite and apparent need for men. There can be exceptions to this, or there can be variations, I'm sure, but men in general do not need a whole lot of every time they go to the bathroom for the woman to say, "Oh, I missed you while you were gone. I wanted to send you a card." You should literally treat each other in that manner. And I'm not really exaggerating when I'm giving these kind of verbal examples. You should do it. There should never be crosswords between two people sexually involved in this. Of course, there should be no hostility between any of you. You know that as being one of the rules. But then it gets into sexual situations, and people are already wired up. Now, I'm aware of this. I just don't go around peeking everyone's bedroom window because I don't have to. That men and women involved with this, then in some way, it just seems natural to you. That what happens between you and your sexual partner is not ironclad under my condition of no hostility. I mean, it can't be, because men and women are going to fight, right? Liz and Richard claim they just fought each other all the time. All the great lovers, like Romeo and Juliet. I mean, what a sorry end. You know, look what happened to them. I mean, they said it wasn't their fault, but that's always the case. You listen to any great love affair being interviewed in People magazine or the lifestyles of the rich and fat, and the people hugging each other. The latest, team from Hollywood of famous and beautiful actors and actresses, they say, yes, we love each other. Oh, sure, we fight. Boy, we fight like cats and dogs. Boy, she'll talk about me. She'll throw things, and she'll tell me how no good I am. You cannot do that. There should not even be a basis of you having any complaint about the other person. And if you do, you should shut up. If nothing else, you should tell them how much you enjoy that beautiful habit they have of always leaving the tube off the toothpaste. You love it, and you just, every time you see it, you think of them, and it makes you miss them even more. Another question. Older people, it seems to me, are more resistant to change. And I find it interesting looking around that the leaders of all the major countries are old men. Are they leading or holding down the fort? All right. It really should be obvious. The only revolutionary leaders are the temporarily young. Old men have always run the world. Always. But now the question, they said more resistant to change, the question gets back to my princes, gets back to the three forces. You look around. You can look now, once you learn how to read your own nervous system, or if you have to, go read a damn history book for the time being. There periodically pops up the temporary situation of a revolutionary leader. You can find it thousands of years ago. It's always a very temporary situation, and they were always singled out. Life knew then that they were different. And of course, the words would be translated now from other languages, and other times now, you look at a history book, and they would call someone who seemed to be a leader 5,000 years ago at some particular area. I'm sure that let us say an English history book now would refer to him as a kind of revolutionary leader, regardless of what name might have been put on him in their language at that time. But they know to spot out if some guy 20 years old suddenly gets in charge, maybe just 2 or 3 months, just enough to attack some old man and get the history books, to kill some old guy, to stir up enough fuss that he was remembered. And part of why he was remembered is you don't really belong here. You are not the norm. The norm is old men. It was only last week, now I think about it, and the week before that, I mentioned some about time zones. I've been pointing out to you that everyone, left to your own devices, left to your own definition of the truth, if you go ahead and live as you are wired up, no matter what your apparent past was, what your apparent upbringing was, you are going to fall after your political body is going to be divided up into the right and the left aisle. You're suddenly going to find that your spokesman, the leader of the House, the Prime Minister, is going to come from the right wing of your ass, of your hips, of where the weight has begun to settle. You are going to become an old man. All old men are conservative. All old men are defending somewhere between the status quo and the past. And the status quo is simply the most up-to-date version that the past has got to talk about. On that basis, to separate artificially the three forces, the status quo, the great present that some mystics and would-be mystics like to talk about, the great eternal now, that's the best they can come up with to cover up I am tied to the past. That is D with its best clothes on. That's D at Sardis with a tuxedo on. That's D on the arms. Who's hot now? I started to say Brigitte Bardot, and I thought that woman's 60 years old. What does that tell about me? That I think about, hey, who is sexy? You can wipe all that off the tape. Brooke Shield. What seems to be the status quo that the old, which includes, please note right now, the whole world right now is run by old men. And those of you that keep up a little bit with current events, you should think of particularly one, and maybe a couple, but particularly one, well, really two, all of you should know about right now, of 9 old men that are in charge of countries, apparently. They're referred to as revolutionary leaders, revolutionary governments. But they stand out. That is not the norm. And the old men will take them down. If not, notice when I start out, I said revolutionary leaders are temporarily young. If the old men don't take them down, they're going to get old real quick. A man can be a revolutionary. Now remember, we're not talking about men. Those of you out there in TV land, I'm not talking about men. I'm not talking about political bodies. I'm not talking about countries even. That's just the crumbs on top of the cracker. We're talking about what takes place in the body of life. But this is one manifestation of it. These young revolutionary leaders, if the old men do not take them down, and please note, those of you who keep up with the news, I assume you know the two that I'm talking about. Right now, the two outstanding, well-known revolutionary leaders, new governments, just a few years old in some cases. The old men, they frighten the old men of these other countries, the major countries. They're going to attack us at any minute. The old men, sometimes they just smile and say, no. But they're continuing to cry out, the old men are going to get us. They're after us. And it's true. But they think it's the old men in this other country. No, no, no. That could be. It's the old men crawling up to fatten their own hips. It's the increasing age of their own nervous system. So the old men are going to overthrow them, or else they're going to be young for a very short period of time. I hate to date this by using names, so just imagine who was the world's greatest revolutionary leader in the past 20 years was in this hemisphere. How long was he a revolutionary leader? Long enough that he took control. He came to America, looked around, made the front pages, made Time magazine, and he got old almost overnight. Either that or the old men would have eaten him up. Remember, what we're talking about is the ever-shifting forces, and how age takes everyone into the D camp. How everyone has to hold the fort, the way the person asked it. They have to defend the status quo. What horizontal age does to each and every person, except the few that can survive this and find their way, your nervous system goes into another time zone in life's body. And to you, for your whole nervous system, everything you hear, everything you see is getting worse. Things are not as good as they were. Things are going downhill, and somebody's got to stand up and say so. And there are young people that would tear all of this down, that us and our forefathers worked so hard for, sweated for, and they would come in here and tear it down overnight. The youth, I guess, have got to have a little freedom, but if this gets much further, we're going to have to take harsh measures. You have a beautiful example. You have an example, though, that's frightening to ordinary people. You have got the great triaxial dance in action. And what little humans feel is those bastards are going to step all over us and not even notice. C and D is going to get into a tango. They're about half drunk, and they're going to run back and forth on this floor. And not only me, they may step on my whole country, my whole community, my whole race, my whole generation. They're going to step on us and not even know it. That's what they're talking about. That's what life is talking about to itself. The truth is that you're already becoming an old tyrant. All you got to do is be aware of your own molecular system. Just seems to sneak up, just out of nowhere. College radio station says, here is the hot new album of the week. And it strikes you. I have been pretty magnanimous. I've tried to be broad-minded. I kept up with Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols. I mean, I didn't like them, but I could listen to it and not make any comment. I figured, you know, it's kids, and they're all going to holler and shout and try to bring down the Queen, cut down the flagpole. But this is too much. They're deranged. I mean, this is beyond just, you know, sticking your finger out at the Pope. This new stuff, they're playing that actually on a college radio. My tax dollars help. Oh, no. God, you're older than you think. And you don't understand anything. You're going to begin to be a defender. You're going to speak more and more of the truth. When I was younger, I guess I was kind of loose with the truth. But the time, we've come to serious times, my friends. There's no doubt about this. Certain people have got to stand up for the truth. We have got to defend that which is sacred. We have got to defend that which is proven profitable. You're a dead man. You're necessary. Just as D is necessary. But the observation was very good. But it should be obvious what the question was, that it seems as though the world's major nations are led by old men. Couldn't be a better view of it. Couldn't be more correct. And those that are not, very few exceptions. And those that seem to be somewhere are temporarily young. But remember, it's not just politics. How old are the Beatles now? How old are the Rolling Stones? Jackson Pollock's already dead. Nobody told me, but I just found out he's dead. And there's still people that look at him, his paintings, and go, if that's what's going on in the world of art, we should bomb New York. I knew it was no good. I mean, that's frightening. Something's wrong that people are painting and pie stuff like that. God forbid you tell your aunt that said that, hey, he did that 30 years ago. That just make her feel worse. I thought this kind of crap only went on right now. I thought this was part of the deranged drug heads in New York call this painting. That is the necessary flow. That is a literal dance going on. It is a transfer of energy from generation to generation. The so-called alienation between every generation, which is a true observation that life made through men. Made it 5,000 years ago. Freud didn't discover it. You didn't discover it. That between every generation seems to be a real conflict, some kind of alienation. And people, as they must do, attempt to analyze it in psychological, sociological, economic terms. It's not it. It's a transfer of energy. This one generation has run with a kind of energy in a certain way, and they reach a certain age, and you can talk all you want to, but you have moved into a different time zone, or if you need space instead of a time element, you have moved into literally another part of life's body. Or if you can put the two together, life has gotten older since you've been here, and you got older with it. A new time zone came about, life has grown more, and you are now expendable. You're becoming extremely expendable. That is, you're going downhill heading for that great hole in the ground. A new generation. That is a new form of power, a new kind of energy. And it comes out in new terminology, new art, new politics, new religion, new social mores, new morality, new concepts. Few people don't know that's a new California discovery is concepts. New concepts of what is true and what is not true. It is a passing of power in what they call alienation of one generation to another is true, but it's got nothing to do with so-called psychology. It is a genetic fact. And only a few people can ever see it, and only a few people can interfere with it. Only a few people can go back and set up this unnatural relationship between you and your parents. To refuse to acknowledge by your own behavior this inherent natural tension between you and your parents. Anybody that thinks that there is some easy way of doing this, anybody that thinks there's any real secret that I can put in one word, me or someone else, those of you old enough to feel any of this when I start talking about age, and you don't have to be 50 or 60 by any means. Once you begin to feel that, if nothing else, there should be an absolute reminder to you that you're attempting something that life makes a few people want to do and gives almost no room to do it. It makes everybody feel the need to. That's why everyone's dissatisfied. But then it is always selected, or just happenstance, whichever one strikes your fancy for the time being, a group of people, a fairly small group of people, and it's always producing somebody like me. And it gets a small group of people, and they spend part of the one guy's lifetime, part of their lifetime, it may go a little where else, but all you can really worry about is your lifetime. It's what happens to you. And it gives the feeling that there is real possibility to this. It holds out an absolute promise. It just seems too real. What little I can do is too real. I'm not operating on faith. You begin to really feel that I told you correctly. It's not faith. It's not theory. Lots of it still don't make sense. Lots of times you think I have talked in such a Baroque and, if not Art Deco manner, that you don't even know where it went. But then those times that you do recall something, and it seems to jibe with some experience, it is something so astounding in a very quiet and a very personal way. It is so astounding that you're hooked on this. As I said, if I moved to Montana, God forbid, most of you would arrange some way you'd move and go there. If I just say I'm going, I don't know what the hell will happen, you'd go there. So it sets this up. But then you can begin to really feel for yourself. This is not a negative statement, but you begin to feel and even an increase in your desire to do this, your need to do it, and your understanding of it grows. That it's more and more just reality. It's not just theory and things I say you don't understand. you can just ignore them for the time being, because you know that all this is based upon another level of reality that's beyond question anymore. It just is. But then, beyond all of that, you begin to really get a sensation of how strong this is in me and some of the other people I feel here. But I can see, quite literally, I can see it, I can feel it, that the room in which we have to maneuver, it's almost frightening if it wasn't so funny. That there is so much that I can already feel that may or may not show to other people. There's so much different in what I understand and what is me now. That in a sense, I feel like a different person, but in a sense, I can also look back and see that where I was, I can hardly move from it. And what I've done has been miraculous right now, and what I've done is almost invisible. This great change I've made, in a sense, is just almost nothing. It is so slight a shift, I wouldn't take anything for it. Not that I have any choice. I'm delighted, but in one sense, it's just been like, to me it was monumental, but from one quite real viewpoint, it was just, and that took me X number of years. And I've only got 10 more. You got no choice. But the idea of how life has instilled this in me, that I can't get rid of it, I can't leave it. It's just, my involvement in this is a fait accompli. And simultaneously, I realize in a very real way that the area in which I am allowed to maneuver and to change, I don't know whether to laugh or cry now that I see it. Of course, then all you can do is buckle up your shoes, grid your loins, or vice versa, and carry on. Not that you have any choice. But, see, everybody else believes they do. At least you know I don't have a choice. Which I guess some of you laughing already sense, and have already tasted a bit before, you could look at that as being the ultimate freedom. Because everybody else believes they can and they can't, and you know better than all of it. I certainly got a lot of mileage out of what, 3 questions? Plus, what's really funny is there weren't 3 questions. I just stood here and made them up. I've often wondered what's on these papers I bring out. God, it is a question. That's a real... I'll be. Well, there's some real questions. If I started reading these, I wouldn't have to sit here and make all these up. Well, wait a minute. These are the same things I've been making up, so I guess it doesn't matter, does it?